My golden years were meant for quiet gardens, not courtroom battles. I'm a retired nurse, and at 67 I thought I'd seen it all. But nothing prepared me for the day my own son, my pride and joy, looked me in the eye and tried to sell my home out from under me. It was then I learned true betrayal and how to fight back. My name is Sarah O'Connell, and at 67, I thought the most turbulent chapters of my life were behind me. For 40 years, I was a nurse. My hands, now spotted with age but still steady, had comforted the sick, held the dying, and welcomed new life into the world. Retirement was supposed to be my reward. A quiet house in a leafy suburb of Portland, a garden to tend, and the endless, peaceful expanse of time. But my greatest pride, and as I would soon learn, my greatest vulnerability, was my son, Mark. Mark was 35, a whirlwind of ambition and charisma, my late husband's charm reborn in a new generation. He wasn't a doctor or a lawyer, the solid professions my generation understood. He was, in his own words, a crypto entrepreneur, a pioneer on the digital frontier. He spoke a language I didn't fully grasp, filled with terms like blockchain, decentralized finance, and the name of his grand project, Eterna-chain. He promised it would revolutionize, well, everything. To me, it was just Mark's dream, and what mother doesn't want to support her son's dream? For the past 2 years, my support had taken a very tangible form. A significant portion of my monthly pension went to him, what he called a stipend to cover his operational base, while he built his empire. It was, I told myself, just helping him with his living expenses. Then came the big ask. 18 months ago, he sat me down in my own living room, his eyes shining with an almost feverish conviction, and asked for an investment. An investment to secure the final development phase of Eterna-chain. I withdrew $150,000 from my retirement fund, the nest egg my husband and I had so carefully built, and transferred it to him. He was my son. The act felt less like a financial transaction and more like an extension of motherhood itself. He was building the future, and I was providing the foundation. Whenever I asked for specifics, for a business plan or a simple progress report, he'd wave a hand dismissively. "Mom, it's too complex to explain," he'd say with a patient smile. "Just trust me. This is for us, for our future." And I did trust him, because in the quiet solitude of my retired life, supporting his grand vision made me feel essential, a vital part of something big and exciting, not just an old woman tending her roses. It was a role I cherished, and one I was paying for dearly. The breaking point didn't arrive with a bang, but with the clinking of wine glasses and the scent of roast chicken. Mark brought his new girlfriend, Tiffany, over for dinner. She was all dazzling smiles and a firm, confident handshake, her eyes sweeping over my home with an appraiser's subtle calculation. I'd spent the afternoon cooking his favorite meal, the one I used to make for him and his father on special occasions. I played my part, the gracious, doting mother, smiling as Tiffany complimented my charming, classic decor, and as Mark regaled her with tales of his imminent success. For a few hours, I allowed myself to believe in the fantasy. A happy family, a son on the verge of greatness, a future where my sacrifices would be validated. As they moved to the living room, their laughter echoing off the familiar walls, I began my usual ritual. Clearing the table, stacking the plates. The sound of running water in the sink created a gentle hum, a screen of white noise that usually brought me comfort. Tonight, it would be my undoing. I turned off the faucet for a moment to grab the dish soap, and in that sudden quiet, their voices carried clearly from the other room. "The final piece of the puzzle, Tiff. The big one," Mark was saying, his voice low and conspiratorial, buzzing with excitement. "This place. It's too big for her anyway. We could easily get $500,000 for it in this market." $500,000. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. Tiffany's voice, smooth as silk, replied, "Seriously? That would be incredible. That would give us the full seed money we need. We could be in Austin in 3 months. Set up for real. No more nickel and diming it." I stood frozen, a soapy plate in my hand. My house. The house where I'd brought Mark home from the hospital, where his height chart was still faintly visible on a doorframe, where my husband, David, had passed away in our bedroom, holding my hand. It wasn't just a house, It was the repository of my entire adult life. Then came the sentence that shattered everything. "And it's perfect," Tiffany said with a light, dismissive laugh. "We could find her a cute little one-bedroom apartment downtown. She wouldn't have to worry about all this space. The yard, it would be a relief for her, really. We'd be helping her." The plate slipped from my grasp, hitting the stainless steel sink with a deafening clatter that they, lost in their scheming, didn't even seem to notice. The sound reverberated through my bones. A cute little one-bedroom. My life, my home, my memories, all neatly packaged and disposed of for their convenience. I wasn't their family. I was a resource. A final, stubborn asset to be liquidated. In that moment, the loving mother I thought I was died, and in her place, a stranger I didn't recognize began to stir. I stood there, paralyzed, listening to them design my obsolescence. The love I had poured into this family, the sacrifices I had made, were being tallied up like assets on a balance sheet, and the final calculation was that I was worth more gone than present. Sleep was a forgotten country that night. I lay in my bed, the familiar weight of the quilt feeling like a lead blanket, pressing me into the mattress. Every shadow in the room seemed to mock me, whispering the words I'd overheard. A cute little one-bedroom. The sentence echoed in the cavernous silence of my mind. My home, my life, reduced to an inconvenience. The heartbreak was a physical thing, a crushing weight in my chest that made each breath a conscious, painful effort. Around 3 a.m., when the darkness outside was at its deepest, I slid out of bed and walked to the small study where we kept the family computer. My hands, usually so steady, trembled as I typed my humiliation into the Google search bar. "Son wants to sell my house for his business." I didn't even know what I was looking for. Validation, an answer, a sign that I wasn't going mad. The search results were a blur of legal articles and advice columns, but one link stood out. It was a forum, a simple, unadorned website with a name that resonated with a painful irony. "Golden Years, Golden Rules." I clicked on it. For hours, I sat there, the glow of the monitor illuminating my tear-streaked face, and I read. Post after post, story after story, from women all over the country. A retired teacher from Ohio, whose daughter had drained her savings for a wellness startup. A widow in Florida, whose son had mortgaged her paid-off home behind her back. The details were different, but the core of the betrayal was identical. It was a language of love twisted into a tool of exploitation. With a surge of desperate courage, I created an anonymous account. Nightingale 67, a nod to my nursing past, and I wrote. I poured out the whole sordid story. The pension, the $150,000 investment, the return-a-chain fantasy, and the final, brutal conversation I had overheard. I hit post and felt a wave of nausea, the fear of exposing my shame to the world. The response was almost immediate. A woman named Alina, a retired history professor, was the first to reply. "This isn't a family squabble, Nightingale," she wrote. "The words you are looking for are elder financial abuse. It has a name. It is a crime." Another user, Maria, who had lost her restaurant to her brother, added, "They count on our love and our silence. That is their greatest weapon." Reading their words was like a dam breaking inside me. The support, the empathy, the sheer, unadorned validation from these strangers was a lifeline. They saw it not as my failure as a mother, but as his crime as a son. They gave my pain a name, and in doing so, they gave me the first glimmer of power. I wasn't just a heartbroken old woman. I was a victim, and I was not alone. It was Alina, the retired professor, who guided me from passive grief to active strategy. In a private message on the forum, she wrote, "Sympathy is a balm, Sarah, but justice requires action." She gave me the name and number of a lawyer, David Thompson, who specialized in cases like mine. "He's our shield and our sword," she had written. With a heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs, I scheduled a video consultation. A man in his late 50s appeared on my screen. Mr. Thompson had a kind, world-weary face, etched with the stories of life's darker side, but his eyes were sharp and missed nothing. His calm demeanor was an immediate anchor in my emotional storm. I told him everything, my voice cracking at times. I held up the flimsy, one-page investment agreement Mark had me sign, a document filled with jargon and devoid of any real legal protection for me. I explained the bank transfers, the pension payments, the overheard conversation. I expected judgment or perhaps pity. Instead, I received professional, focused validation. He listened without interruption, nodding slowly. "Mrs. O'Connell," he said when I finished, his voice gentle but firm. "This is not a gray area. This is a textbook case of financial fraud and undue influence. Your only mistake was loving your son. He is the one who exploited that love." He then laid out a plan, not with emotional flourishes, but with the clear, cold logic of the law. "First, we will formally document every transaction and communication. Second, we petition the court, laying out the clear evidence of fraud. Third, and this is crucial, we file for an immediate injunction to freeze any accounts containing your funds." When the call ended, the frantic, chaotic grief that had consumed me was gone. In its place was a cold, quiet resolve. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting to Mark's whims or cleaning up his messes. I was a woman with a lawyer and a plan. I was finally taking back control. I didn't choose a dramatic, tearful confrontation over the dinner table. Mr. Thompson had been clear. Let the law speak first. It's a language he can't manipulate. So, I embraced the quiet execution of our plan. The first blow landed not with a shout, but with the crisp rustle of an envelope. It was delivered by a process server to the sleek, minimalist apartment Mark rented. An apartment I now understood my investment was funding. He was likely in the middle of a call, charming another potential partner, when the summons was placed in his hand. I can picture the look on his face. Confusion, then irritation, followed by a dawning, sickening dread as he read the legal language detailing accusations of fraud, and a demand for a full accounting of the $150,000. The second blow was silent and digital. Almost concurrently with the summons's arrival, the court injunction took effect. The bank account where he held the remnants of my life savings, the account that fueled his lifestyle and Tiffany's dreams of Austin, was frozen solid. A frantic call to his bank would have confirmed his worst fears. The numbers on his screen were still there, a tantalizing mirage of wealth, but they were untouchable, locked behind a wall of legal fire he couldn't breach. His entire house of cards, built on my trust and my money, had just had its foundation vaporized. Panic, raw and pure, ignited into fury. The carefully constructed facade of the calm, visionary entrepreneur shattered. There was no more talk of decentralized finance or future paradigms. There was only the primal rage of a spoiled child whose favorite toy had been taken away. Within the hour, his car screeched to a halt in my driveway. The slam of his car door was like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. I heard his heavy, furious footsteps stomping up the walkway. He didn't ring the bell. He hammered on the door with his fist, the wood vibrating with his rage. He was here to deploy his old, reliable arsenal: guilt, emotional blackmail, and intimidation. He expected to find the same mother he had always known, the one who would absorb his anger, soothe his ego, and ultimately give in. He was about to be very, very disappointed. I had been waiting, listening to his approach not with fear, but with a strange, steely calm. When the pounding started, I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and opened it. He stood on my porch, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, ready to unleash the storm. He found me waiting. Not cowering in a corner, but standing in the entryway, the hall light casting a steady glow behind me. His reaction was a masterclass in manipulation, a desperate, flailing performance that cycled through every tactic in his well-worn playbook. First came the rage. "What the hell is this, Mom?" he roared, waving the summons in his hand like a weapon. "Are you out of your mind? A lawsuit. You're suing your own son." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't engage. I just looked at him, my silence a more powerful shield than any argument. His anger, finding no purchase, melted into a theatrical display of wounded betrayal. His voice cracked, and he summoned tears to his eyes. "After everything I've done, everything I'm trying to build for us, for our family, this is how you repay me. You're destroying my dream." He paused, waiting for me to crumble, to apologize, to make it all better. I remained still. Seeing that his tears were failing, he reached for the heaviest weapon in his arsenal, the memory of his father. Dad would be so ashamed of you right now, he whispered, his voice thick with false sorrow. He always believed in me. He would have supported me. That was the line, the one that severed the last, frayed thread of maternal obligation. He was using the memory of a good man to justify his own corruption. Finally, when all else failed, came the pure, venomous spite. His face twisted into an ugly sneer. "You're a bitter, lonely old woman," he spat. "You can't stand to see me succeed. You'd rather burn it all down than see me happy." But the words no longer had the power to wound me. They were just noise, the desperate tantrum of a man who had lost control. Inside my head, I heard the calm, reassuring voices from the forum, the steady, professional tone of Mr. Thompson. I was no longer an audience of one, trapped in his toxic theater. I was backed by a chorus of experience and a fortress of law. I took a small step back, my hand on the doorknob. I looked him directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "Mark," I said, and my voice was perfectly level, devoid of the emotion he craved. "You can say all of this to my lawyer." Then, I did something I had never done in my entire life. I gently, deliberately, and irrevocably closed the door in my son's face. The soft click of the latch was the loudest, most definitive sound I had ever made. It was the sound of my independence being born. The courtroom was a sterile, impersonal space, a stark contrast to the emotionally charged theater of our family life. Here, Mark's charisma was useless. His claims about eterna chain crumbled under the dispassionate scrutiny of legal discovery. The investigation was swift and brutal in its efficiency. Mr. Thompson, with the court's authority, laid bare the truth. Eterna Chain wasn't a revolutionary tech project. It was a ghost. There was no code, no development team, no intellectual property. It was nothing more than a slick website and a fancy name Mark had invented. The bank statements told the real story. My $150,000 hadn't gone into servers or software development. It had paid for the lease on his luxury apartment, for Tiffany's designer handbags, for lavish dinners in Austin where they were networking, and for a disastrously timed, highly leveraged bet on a plummeting cryptocurrency that had wiped out nearly a third of the funds in a single week. Faced with irrefutable evidence of wire fraud and a clear pattern of deception, Mark's bravado evaporated. The visionary entrepreneur was exposed for what he was, a common con man who had chosen his own mother as his first and easiest mark. He was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. I didn't attend the sentencing. There was no triumph in his downfall, only a profound, aching sadness for the son I thought I had. I didn't get all my money back. Much of it was gone forever, vanished into the ether of his lavish lifestyle. But the court's judgment did what was most important. It affirmed my ownership of my home, free and clear, and secured the remainder of my retirement savings. Justice, in its cold, impartial way, had been served. 6 months have passed. The silence in my house is different now. It's not the silence of loneliness, it's the silence of peace. The autumn sun streams through the living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, and for the first time in years, I feel completely at home. The ghosts of guilt and obligation have been exorcised. I didn't let my story end in a courtroom. I needed to transform my pain into a purpose. I started a blog, a simple website I built myself. I called it The Nightingale's Ledger. The name was a tribute to my past as a nurse, a life spent caring and observing, but it was also a declaration. This was my ledger now, my accounting of a life reclaimed. On the blog, I shared my story. I wrote about the subtle manipulations, the language of love used as a weapon, the slow erosion of boundaries. I detailed the warning signs of elder financial abuse, not with anger, but with the calm clarity of a survivor. I wanted to create the resource I so desperately needed in those dark, sleepless nights. To my astonishment, people started reading. The blog grew, shared across social media and forums for seniors. My story, once a source of private shame, became a public shield for others. This morning, I'm sitting in my favorite armchair, a cup of Earl Grey steaming beside me. I'm reading a new comment on my latest post. It's from a man in California. "Dear Nightingale," he wrote, "I read your story last month. My sister was doing the same thing to our father, convincing him to invest in her business. Your words gave me the courage to step in, to ask the hard questions, and to protect him. You saved my dad's life savings. Thank you. A slow, genuine smile spreads across my face. I pick up my teacup. The warmth seeps into my hands, a tangible feeling of contentment. Mark's betrayal had almost cost me everything, but in the end, it gave me something unexpected. A new voice, a new purpose. I am Sarah O'Connell. I am not a victim. I am the nightingale, and I am finally singing my own song. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's not always easy to share these moments, but I believe in the power of speaking our truth. If you've ever felt unheard or unseen in your own family, please know you are not alone. I encourage you to share your own experiences in the comments below, because every story shared is a light for someone else in the dark.